Of the 3 rare puppets introduced in Gen 2, Entei's 580 base stat total has its focus more on the physical attacking side than Suicune's bulk or Raiku's speed and special attack. In theory, during a solo run, especially when that's minimum battles, you either want to be tanking enough damage or dealing enough out, so at least we're not stuck with a legendary Pokemon that's pretty middling in stats. Entei's 115 attack stat paired with its speed of 100 means that we'll be attacking first the majority of the time, and its special attack stat of 90 means that in a pinch we can get away with using special moves if we have to. However, like your mother, there's a big old but. Fire moves are special in this gen, and of the moves that Entei has access to, our physical damage output can kind of suck at times. But before we look at Entei's moveset, let's briefly go over the rules. Rule number 1 is we can only use Entei in battle, but we can capture other Pokemon for HM butler purposes. Number 2 is that we can't use items in battle, held items are fine. And 3, a minimum battles run is defined as only battling trainers / engaging in encounters that prohibit us from progressing the game. I've marked them on the spreadsheet in the description. Now onto Entei's moveset. It is basic. You get fire moves or you get normal moves, excluding bite, which is standard with the 3 legendaries. It's not really until level 51, where we get flamethrower, that there's anything Entei has that's worth learning. All its decent moves come from TMs. However, even though Entei can learn some decent enough moves, major players like Fire Blast and Solar Beam come too late in the game to actually be useful. Honestly, Return and Iron Tail are probably the only TMs that actually pull their weight. However, there is one TM on that list that I have purposely not mentioned. This TM, let me be read, and I'm going to make a bet and say that you have no idea what that TM is. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Kicking the game off, things are pretty standard at the beginning. I did go into an editor and give this Entei perfect IVs. I did this because it's basically not possible without them, just trust me on that one. We already have enough restrictions here. In doing that, I saw that Entei's hidden ability was Ice. That'll come into play later, but without that, the run really wouldn't be possible. Anyway, start the game, get the Pokemon, go to Mr. Pokemon, come back, first rival battle. We're still level 5, I obviously replaced Cyndaquil so that we face Totodile, but it's absolutely no match for Entei, and spoiler, it never will be. The rivals Pokemon never level up their moves to ever really possess a threat, unless you're the Bayleaf before Bugsy. With that done, we have Falkner standing in our way. This isn't the remakes, so there's no way that you have to climb up the tower in Violet City. We do, however, miss out on Flash, which, while a pain later on, just leaves me stumbling around in the dark. The first battle with Falkner isn't great. While his Pokemon have Mud Slap, which we're weak to, it doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but it does lower our accuracy. While we make it past the Pidgey the first time around, wasting turns on using Clair and getting hit by Mud Slap ultimately means that our HP is just too low to defeat Pidgeotto, even if we could hit the damn thing. While it does take a few tries, the most sensible strat is to just keep hammering Bite and hope you get the flinches. This will take you through the Pidgey and finally the Pidgeotto. In Azalea Town, we aggravate the old man Kurt, who injures his leg jumping down a well, leaving us to clean up the mess. While these battles aren't difficult, it does highlight the severe lack of variety in whatever team is the major antagonist of a Pokemon game. I know Gen 2 gets a bad rap when it comes to rocket battles, but having to slaughter hundreds of Rattata and Ekans like an industrial pest control service just numbs my brain. For Bugsy, our biggest threat is always going to be a Scyther with its high attack and speed. However, this is one of the rare occasions where Entei's fire typing actually comes in handy. For Metapod, we simply spam Ember. Weedle gets the same treatment, and for Scyther, even though it's trying to build up its Fury Cutter damage, the battle's over in just a few turns. However, before we can round up a Farfetch'd in Ilex Forest, we have the rival to contend with. His team of Ghastly, Croconaw and Zubat have the ability to simply chip away at our health. While Ghastly is incapable of damaging us, Croconaw's Water Gun, no matter how pathetic, is easily able to soak Entei. I tried the battle a few more times, even opting to teach Entei Mud Slap in the hopes of lowering Croconaw's accuracy, but in the end, we can only put our faith in the power of Bite to flinch Croconaw into submission. When that's dealt with, the rival Zubat is easily taken care of. However, now comes the Brock of Gen 2, Whitney. While the aforementioned Brock and Roxanne for Gen 3 get a rap for being walls of their respective games, I'm going to say that Whitney's worse, because she gives you hope after making it through 2 gym leaders. Then you go up against Miltank with rollout and you're done. Much like with my previous Suicune run, we're at level 15, our move pool is shallow, and Miltank is dummy thick. Oh yeah, and we're weak to rock. For the first few battles, I go in with Ember, Lair, Bite, and Mudslap. In theory, I'm hoping to Spider-Man 3 the Miltank.
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
While you can make it past the Clefairy easy enough but still take some damage, as soon as Miltank rolls up, it's over pretty quickly. I keep trying the battle for too long. I came a little prepared and taught Entei Headbutt in the hopes of doing more damage and proccing a flinch, but with that strat, you're on your knees praying to RNGesus. After about 30 battles or so, I decide to pull some knowledge from my Suicune run and trade with the guy in the Goldenrod department store to get them a chop with the gold berry. This, when held, restores 30 HP. Much like with that other run, it's one of the keys to eventual victory. The other may have been buying a protein with whatever meager Pokédollars that I had, but in the end, the secret sauce is hating yourself enough to keep repeatedly pressing A until the battle is over. We start off lucky with not only getting a crit on the Clefairy, but also causing it to flinch, allowing us to head into the battle with Miltank at full health. RNGesus giveth, but he also taketh away, and we get hit with a crit rollout from Miltank. We retaliate with Mudslap a couple of times, while Miltank continues to whittle down our health. Then our Goldberry kicks in. But there was a part of the strat that I left out, and that is Ember. If we're able to proc a burn, it'll lower Miltank's devastating attack. If we're able to proc a burn. Despite roasting Miltank like I'm in a smokehouse, it just won't proc. And somehow, in spamming Ember, Miltank missing its attack and occasionally using Milk Drink, we're somehow able to make it through after like 100 tries. On to Ecruteak and another encounter with the rival in the Burn Tower. This always acts as a bit of a litmus test for how your mon's progressing, because the rival here tends to be rather annoying. Not only are we at a type disadvantage with his Croconaw, but now that his Ghastly's a Haunter and can outspeed us, we're getting hit with Curse right out of the gate. With Bite doing pathetic damage, it's not long before we need to go and get some levels. The only source of XP are the nearby Kimono Sisters. The ability to take them on one by one, in addition to the evolution showering us with decent XP, means that we're at level 20 for the rival. However, Bite still isn't cutting it. We get cursed, and that's another failed attempt. Instead, the path to victory lies in doing what dogs love, digging holes. By using Dig, we're able to avoid Haunter's Spite, and while we don't KO Haunter, it chooses to use Lick. We're not paralyzed, and we're able to KO it. While we have no effective moves against Croconaw, we can continue spamming Headbutt to defeat it. Zubat gets the same treatment. Then, when Magnemite finally appears, we can actually use a move that is weak to. With the rival out of the way, it makes the most sense to take on Morty. Though Bite at 60 attack power isn't the greatest move, it can make pretty short work of all the Pokemon leading up to the gym leader. As you might imagine, Bite's still enough to take down Morty's Ghastlies and Haunters, but we come unstuck when Gengar comes out. I forewent picking up the Mint Berry at Moo Moo Farm out of a combination of laziness and stubbornness, and it ended up paying off. The very next battle, Entei's able to chomp its way through Morty's entire team. But Gengar, Hypnosis fails 3 times, just not his day, and we're able to win. Doubt I'd be able to do that a second time around though. From here, we need to climb the Olivine Lighthouse so we can trigger the medicine for the Ampharos and can then head over to fight Chuck. The lineup of peons in our way aren't too much trouble because they don't really have any moves that are effective against Entei. However, Chuck's Poliwrath could end up being a bit of a roadblock. Even though we've been getting through gym leaders, we've still yet to obtain a decent set of moves. Our best move is still Headbutt, so we're forced to keep spamming it against the Primate. Thankfully, Entei's decent attack stat makes up for it and we're able to knock it out. However, when Poliwrath comes out, I learned something new. You can get hypnotized while underground. Being hypnotized means we're vulnerable and it only takes a crit surf to knock Entei out. Much like Morty, the second time was the charm. Primate goes down after a couple of headbutts. For Poliwrath, we're blessed with 2 flinches from headbutt and a hypnosis miss, which lets us get through the battle without taking a single point of damage. Now, instead of heading to Pryce, I decided to take on Jasmine instead. In theory, we have an advantage against her metal Pokemon. First time around, I go for Ember on Magnemite, but it doesn't get the KO, leading us to get paralyzed. This, combined with Steelix's Rock Throw, ends up defeating us pretty quickly. Second time around, I go for Dig on the Magnemite to mitigate the range. For Steelix, I stick with Ember, and that, paired with a couple of Rock Throw misses, lets us eventually make it past Jasmine's final Magnemite. Before Pryce, we have to go through the thrilling Rocket Hideout story, which consisted of hammering A for several minutes until we're able to finally visit the gym leader. We don't have anything effective against his Pokemon, so can only rely mostly on Headbutt to defeat his Seal, Dugong, and Piloswine. We've been using Headbutt so much in this run that I feel like Entei will have a brain that's mostly soup by the end of this thing. More Rocket Plot, Rival, Icy Cave Thing, Clair. And I'm not sure how this battle will go. Our moveset is still terrible. While Headbutt can get through the first Dragonair, when it comes to Kingdra, which will always appear next, a couple of Surfs will just wash us away. One benefit from the Radio Tower story portion is that you can pick up the Pink Bow. The Pink Bow increases the power of normal type moves. Later replaced by the Silk Scarf, it's still not enough to see us through the battle. While we're not critting or flinching the first Dragonair, we're getting hit with Thunder Wave, which is an added death sentence when we're up against Kingdra. Several battles later, and it's clear we're making no headway with our head. We need a different strategy. Unfortunately, there aren't many available. One option is to upgrade to Return, which we can get on Sundays from the Goldenrod department store. While it does decent damage against the Dragonite, it's not magically transformed our first battle into a one-hit KO. While we can buy some proteins in an attempt to somehow get the damage range of the first Dragonair, and while that doesn't change anything dramatically, if we're fortunate with Thunderwave missing, we're able to make it through to Kingdra. And if Kingdra for some reason decides to go for Smokescreen instead of Surf, we're able to get some good damage on it. Despite Clair using a Hyper Potion, we are somehow able to make it past the Kingdra for the very first time. However, it's not long before we're eventually hit with a Thunder Wave amidst all of our return misses. Unfortunately, we're just getting chipped away with damage until we ultimately faint. So close, but it is possible. On one of the next battles, we start with a crit against Dragonair. Then, on Kingdra, despite being hit with Surf, we're able to knock it out in just 2 hits. For Clair's second Dragonair, it still takes 2 hits and we don't get the miss on the Thunder Wave. At 26 HP, we're on to Clair's final Dragonair. Dragon Breath takes us down to 3 HP, we retaliate with Return and get a crit. With that, we have all our Johto gym badges and can continue our uphill climb with the Elite Four. Entei really doesn't have a good matchup against any of the Elite Four. Each one of them has moves that can potentially end us in just 1 hit, with the big unknown being Lance, who, on paper, can absolutely spank us. At this point, we're at level 43 and still have Return, Ember, Bite and Dig, a true powerhouse. However, for Will at least, we have a move that can potentially do some damage. As expected, even against Xatu, Bite's only doing about half. And when it's done confusing us, Psychic can chip away our HP. Then, when Slowbro waddles along, we are done for. However, spamming Bite is our best option and can eventually get us through his entire team. While none of his Pokemon have a particularly effective move against us, the sheer number of them is what's ultimately Entei's downfall. Either way, the fact we're leaving the victory up to luck doesn't bode well for the rest of the Elite Four. Koga's MO is to up his Pokemon's evasion and try to get off Toxic with the likes of Muck and Crobat. While Ariados can't put up too much of a fight, and neither can the Fortress, thanks to Ember, Muck and Crobat are a different story. Even though in our first time around, a combination of Ember and Return is able to secure a win. Brock though is where we start to become unstuck. The first time through, our moveset is still unchanged, we can get through the Hitmontop with getting off a Return, and then timing our Dig. When Onix comes out, unlike with Poliwrath, I knew Earthquake could hit when underground, I just forgot Brock's Onix had the move, because you're mostly steamrolling through him casually. Earthquake does a fair chunk of our HP, and we don't have any other moves that could finish off Onix, So a few moves later, we're knocked out. After a bit of a think, the best move we have against the Onyx is Iron Tail. Now when we face it, Iron Tail is nearly taking it out in one, but we don't move on to Brock's Machamp without taking damage. Machamp's Cross Chop maybe does about a quarter, but with both Return and Iron Tail doing a little under half, it puts Machamp within healing range. In one of our next battles, when Onyx goes for Sandstorm, the chip damage combined with our Return is enough to KO it. However, our health's not looking too great when we come up against Hitmontop. Despite that, we're able to put on the hurt just enough to put it down, so Bruno's Hitmonchan comes out next. Now, Hitmonchan has Mach Punch, a priority move, and our Return isn't doing enough damage for the KO, meaning that our run is cut short again. However, on the very next battle, we get a bit of luck with a crit. Even though we've managed to beat Bruno, our win ratio is getting worse and worse as we're climbing the ranks of the Elite Four. When it comes to Karen, we may be in a slightly better position than Brock, but with a bulky Pokemon like Umbreon and Karen's Pokemon's love overloading accuracy, we're in for a bad time. The first time around, we don't do as bad, managing to get past Umbreon while still at full health, despite our accuracy having been lowered.
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
Guess we're not the only ones with those strats. Then, when Gengar comes out, not only do we get paralyzed by Lick, but our lowered accuracy and getting hit by Spite means we soon run out of Dig. Despite beating it, when the mighty Murkrow appears, we're either paralyzed or missing when we try to attack. Paralyzed and at 16 HP, we eventually get through to Houndoom, but with no more PB for Dig, you can imagine how that ends. Despite a few more attempts, winning against Karen is a roll of the dice. In a successful battle, we're able to get off 2 Iron Tails despite being attacked by Sand. Then for Gengar, we're able to pop underground and thankfully not get paralyzed with Lick when we resurface. With the 2 biggest roadblocks out of the way, finishing off Murkrow with Return and then finally scoring a hit with Dig a few times is enough for Houndoom. For Vileplume, I bounced back and forth between a few moves before settling on Ember, but not before Vileplume ended up paralyzing us. However, all the victories, as lucky as they were up to this point, don't really mean much because next up is Lance, and we basically have nothing that is effective against any of his Pokemon. While his Gyarados, on occasion, likes to go for Surf, it will, more often than not, try to set up Rain Dance first, because that would allow its Surf to OHKO us. With that, we're able to use Return to knock it out. But then we have Aerodactyl. Its speed, combined with Rock Throw's ability to flinch, combined with Iron Tail's poor accuracy, gives it all the time it needs to flatten us. But when Iron Tail does hit, it's able to take down Aerodactyl in just one hit. Not that it really matters though, if we're getting hit with at least one Rock Throw, we're still just a little above half HP. Dragonites, as they do, love to keep spamming Thunder Wave until it hits, which in this instance, it sometimes just doesn't proc once. Our good luck keeps up as we're popping off returns and getting crits. We're even, somehow, managing to get past Charizard too, but by the time the final Dragonite appears, our health's just too low to withstand Outrage. A lucky crit isn't able to get us out of this one, unfortunately. Well, that game plan isn't working. I decided to head out and grab some proteins to see if that would work in our favour. Now, I certainly have been saving in between these Elite Four matches because the sheer luck that would be needed to get through all this in one straight sitting is practically non-existent. The same strats apply to getting through Will, Koga, Bruno and Karen until we're eventually back at Lance. A while back I mentioned that Entei's hidden power was Ice. Without this, I really doubt even thinking about a victory against Lance is possible. At this level, with this shallow move pool, Entei just can't survive. And even if I were to use the rare candies I've collected so far, there is then no way Red later on would be possible. We have to beat Lance with what we have or not at all. So when we eventually make it to Lance and make it through his Gyarados and don't get flinched to death by Aerodactyl, hidden power isn't great. Even a crit couldn't take down his level 47 Dragonite, and that's with the Nevermelt Ice equipped. Trying again and again, it looks like hidden power, despite being super effective, just isn't outputting enough damage. With getting paralysed and our health chipped away, trying to win against Lance feels more like a pipe dream with each battle. In a moment of desperation, I even taught Entei rest with the hope of somehow being able to recoup some health, though in reality the damage output of Lance's Pokemon would mitigate any attempt to get Entei's health back. Turns out there was nothing much to do but just keep trying until we finally get a break. Against Gyarados, our plan hasn't changed, just keep spamming return. Then for Aerodactyl, we're hoping for the Rock Throw miss, which we get. At full HP, we're now onto our first Dragonite. We get off our first hidden power, Dragonite goes for a Thunder Wave that misses, allowing us to follow up and take it out. Leveling up to 48, we're then on the second Dragonite. Same strat as before. Hit with hidden power, and then somehow we get another Thunder Wave miss. We're on full HP against the Charizard, and it doesn't have any move that's particularly effective against Entei. We go for return, tank a slash from Charizard, before hitting it with another return. Now, we only have Lance's level 50 Dragonite remaining. From what we've seen, we can tank at least 2 Outrages, so long as our hidden power can do just over half damage. We have a chance. And hidden power does less than half. Outrage, however, does a little under half, so maybe we can make this. After going for return, because why not, we get hit with the second Outrage and are left on just 32 HP. As long as there are no potions coming out, we should have this. We go for return, and we're good. Now we're on to Kanto. We don't technically have a particular advantage against any of the gym leaders we're about to face, aside from Erika's grass Pokemon, so the order really doesn't affect much. For convenience, we start with Lieutenant Surge when we've disembarked from the SS Aqua. At the end of the battles with the Elite Four, we've made it to level 49, which gives us the level advantage against most of the gym leaders in Kanto. For Surge's Raichu, we're still relying on the power of friendship with return, and his team's general lack of defensive Pokemon allows us to sail past Raichu on Electrode. Even when Electabuzz is sent out, a couple of returns do the job. Unfortunately, we're just a few levels away from gaining Flamethrower for the Magneton. However, even though return isn't super effective against Magneton, the move's still more than capable than taking us across the finish line. From here, I decided to head to Saffron and Sabrina. Though our Psychic Pokemon are powerful, like Surge, they're weak defensively, meaning it's another several rounds of spamming return to defeat her. Then it's time to spend far too long trying to navigate the warp panels to actually escape the gym. While I do go mark Lavender Town on the map, because we're going to have to go through Rock Tunnel without Flash sooner or later, I go back to Saffron and then to the Cycling Road in order to reach Fuchsia. Because Janine's pathetic Pokemon from a level perspective anyway aren't much of a threat, it's a bunch of low risk experience that should give us enough to get Flamethrower. After taking out Crobat, it's Wheezing that gives us the remaining XP to get an actual decent fire move. After learning Flamethrower, I test it out on Venomoth to crisp it up. Still putting off Rock Tunnel and the Power Plant, I head to Cerulean to get rid of the bunch of trainers blocking your way to where Misty will be on a date later on. Because I'm not anticipating Misty herself to be an easy battle, I might as well stock up on what experience I can. I then go and finish Rock Tunnel in order to battle Misty at level 52. I'm still relying on return, but because we're not one-shotting her Pokemon, it's allowing her Golduck to get off Surf and nearly take out half our HP. And while we can sometimes make it past the Quagsire, when it comes to Misty's Lapras, that thing is just too bulky to be finished off. But we've still got some training options remaining, and first on my list is Erika. With relatively low-level Pokemon that we're actually effective against, her battle consisted of mostly mashing Flamethrower rather than return, so it was a nice change of pace at least. With Erika down, Brock's up next. I've still been keeping Iron Tail around for this very reason. While Brock's Graveler can be taken out with Iron Tail, we've not got anything that's great against Omastar, and because that thing has Surf, it's easily able to KO us. While Entei can learn Solar Beam and Sunny Day, it's really not worth teaching it the moves just for this battle, especially considering the damage that Iron Tail can output. All we had to do is just survive one round of Surf and we should be okay. Though it does take a few tries and a number of annoying misses against an Omastar that for some reason chooses Spike Cannon instead of Surf, we're able to get through it. Then it's just a case of hammering Iron Tail to make it past the remainder of Brock's Pokemon. While I maybe could take on Misty now, I decide to just carry on south all the way to face Blaine. And even though we resist the majority of his Pokemon's moves, it's not like we've got anything effective against them. Despite that, Blaine's Magcargo, Magmar and Rapidash end up being a first try victory. Now at level 55, that's as good as we're going to get against Misty. Rolling into battle with a pink bow on top of return, we're still just out of range for taking out the Golduck in one hit, which means it's able to get off Surf and do a fair chunk of damage. When Quagsire comes out, instead of Amnesia, it uses Rain Dance. And while we can knock it out, that Rain Dance means Surf gets a boost. So when Lapras comes out, and of course we don't one-shot it, its Surf leaves us on 11 HP. Our end is pretty inevitable when Starmie rocks up and we get whipped. However, next time around, it turns out that return against Golduck was a range. When we've knocked it out and Quagsire comes out, it uses Amnesia instead of Rain Dance, allowing us to KO it too. Now, we can definitely tank a Surf from Lapras. However, because Surf wouldn't be a one-shot from Lapras, it goes for Rain Dance, meaning that we're able to get past it and to Misty's final Pokemon, Starmie. While we're just shy of KOing Starmie, we do manage to tank a Surf, taking us down to 73 HP. When Misty's finally out of the picture, we're left with just one gym leader, Blue. We don't really have an effective counter against every one of his Pokemon, and combined with their relatively high level, it could end up being a pretty tough battle. We're under-leveled by Blue's standards. His Pidgeot is one level above us at 56, but Return does do over half of Pidgeot's health, and its wing attack is pretty pathetic. Against Rhydon, I was expecting the Earthquake after we used Iron Tail, but it instead goes for Sandstorm. But then we get the Earthquake after Iron Tail misses. Combine the fact that chip damage from Sandstorm is higher in this gen, we've got Blue playing 4D chess with us. While it does take a couple more tries to get to good rhythm, things turn out better against Blue. For Pidgeot, we still stick with Return twice to knock it out. Then, for Rhydon, we can use Iron Tail and not miss. Like a number of Pokemon with Rain Dance and Water moves, they'll usually try to power up their moves first, which works in our favour against Gyarados. Next, Alakazam is powerful, but a glass cannon that can easily be smashed by Return. Finally, we're at a decent bit of health when facing Arcanine. Its most effective move against us is probably Extreme Speed, and while we do crit with Return, it puts Arcanine into healing range, so for the first time in the run, I can actually make use of Rest to recoup some HP. Then, after being asleep for a few turns and realising that Rest was kind of pointless, Leftovers would have been better, we end up in the same position as before. The next time the Arcanine gets within healing range, I go for Rest again because our health's been chipped away at. Then, as our health keeps dwindling, I, for some reason, go for a third Rest. But, in spite of a really sloppy battle against Arcanine, we do eventually defeat it, leaving just Blue's Executor. We have Flamethrower, Executor's weak against it, not much more to say. Before heading out to Mount Silver and facing off against Red, I collect the few rare candies that I'm able to without getting into a battle, which is around 7. For the sake of exploration, I see how far I'd get against Red at my current level, 57. Safe to say, it's not really happening. Despite his level 1 Pikachu being defensively weak, the sheer level gap and moves like Attract make this fight more trouble than it's worth. Even if we do make it past and to Espeon, it is more than capable of KOing us with just one Psychic. Eventually, I stuff Entei full of rare candy and try it again. I get rid of Iron Tail for Swagger. I really don't like relying on confusion strats, but we've got a big hill to climb, and at the time, it looked like the only way of surmounting it. Pikachu is easily enough to handle, just using Flamethrower for a 2-hit KO. Espeon is a different matter, however. Its Psychic does well over half damage, and our moves don't take it past half HP. And it's faster than we are, so we're basically walled. Even when we combo Leftovers with Swagger, relying on a 50% chance for the mortal enemy of your dog to hit itself is just not swinging in our favour. On one occasion, our Swag Strat manages to take us past Espeon at just over half HP. Blastoise is up next, and while we're faster than it and hit it with Swagger, Blastoise gets off Surf and absolutely obliterates us. At this point, I don't really want to entertain a strat where we have to Swagger every one of Red's Pokemon for a chance of victory. At one point, for some reason, I taught Detect to Entei, thinking that it may somehow help, but it was ultimately pointless. My approach was just pulling from Entei's shallow move pool like I was bobbing for rotten apples. Again and again I tried, but there was no way I was getting past the Blastoise, it just wasn't happening. So I took a little break, browsed Entei's moves, and tried to imagine a scenario where I could win. I was in a situation where Red was able to send out Pokemon that were quicker than Entei, or had super effective moves against it. Entei's damage output was just too little, our health was being sapped away far too easily. If we wanted to win, then we had to change that. For the health problem, we had Leftovers and I still had Rest. While Leftovers work if you can stall or get into a position where the amount that Leftovers heals is more than the damage you're taking, then you're in a decent position. Rest works best if you're not getting 2 or 1-shotted, so let's look at mitigating the damage and upping our attack. The only move that Entei can learn that's capable of doing that is Curse, and you get Curse from the guy at the top of the Celadon Mansion at night, and it's a move that I relied on heavily in my Suicune run. Problem with Curse is that not only is it lowering your speed, but it's only upping your defense and not your special defense. And the super effective or general damage that's killing us is all elemental. Plus, even if we wanted to set up Curse, Who's going to let us do it? At the best of times, we're getting two-shot. If only there was a move that Entei could learn that would help with that. A move that I hinted at right at the very beginning of this run. And that move is Roar. Now, in theory, we have a plan of action. Putting that plan into action, however, may be a little challenging. When we face Red again, we're at level 65 after picking up the remaining rare candies, and we've got Return, Curse, Roar, and Rest. The plan is to roar out a Pokemon that's viable to set up against, and that most viable Pokemon happens to be Snorlax. While its Body Slam at first does a ton of damage, we can slowly mitigate that. Not only that, if we get paralyzed, we can use Rest to heal ourselves. Then we'd simply have to just use Return to one-shot the remainder of Red's team. However, we're back to your mother and her butt again, because it's a big one and it's got two annoying cheeks. The first is that Roar switches in a random Pokemon, and that Pokemon won't always be the one that we want. It could be an Espeon or a Blastoise. The second annoyance is that if we were to KO Snorlax after buffing ourselves, Red's going to send out one of his most effective Pokemon. Then we're not fast enough and we'll be hemorrhaging HP pretty quick. So in order for this plan to work, a very specific set of circumstances have to be met. We need to be able to get into a rhythm of roaring out favourable Pokemon, but we can't KO those Pokemon because those are our safe Pokemon that we can heal up against. Rather than trying to convey the plan with words, it's better to actually show it in practice, and it took many battles to get this just right. We start the battle against Pikachu and immediately go for Roar. Pikachu's faster, but its Thunder misses and we drag Snorlax out. Off to a good start. Then we start popping off Curse to increase our attack and defense. While Snorlax is happy to use Body Slam, which will do increasingly less damage over time, getting paralyzed is pretty much par for the course, and we can rest out of that. When we've sufficiently buffed ourselves, we rest with Entei. In theory, we should be able to tank the Body Slams, but not when Snorlax crits. As long as we wake up in time and it doesn't get another crit, we can rest again. Thankfully, we're able to heal again, and can finally use Roar to bring out Blastoise. Now we just need it to cooperate. Because Blastoise Surf is a range and we're at high health, it'll always go for Rain Dance. And it does, allowing us to pop off a Return, and despite its bulk, it's a one-shot. Next up is Espeon. We could tank a Psychic, but instead Espeon uses Reflect, which can get pretty annoying. But despite the Reflect, we're still able to knock Espeon out. With our two biggest threats out of the way, we've still got Pikachu. It uses Thunder, and of course it gets a crit, which takes us down to 65 HP. We've already lined up Return. While it knocks Pikachu out, depending on who's sent out next, it could make or break the battle, and it's Snorlax. Body Slam outside of a crit, and we should be fine. I immediately go Rest, while Snorlax uses Amnesia. Works for us. I'm guessing Snorlax runs out of Body Slams, and it just so happens to line up with Espeon's Reflect fading as we then use Return. It's enough to take out Snorlax, leaving us with just two Pokemon. Red sends out Charizard. Flamethrower could be a problem, and it deals about a quarter of our HP, but we retaliate with Return, and it's all good. Finally, we have Red's final Pokemon, Venusaur. We know that Solar Beam is coming, so go straight for Return. Return hits, and it's all over. Red is defeated, praise our Jesus and the power of balking. If you told me at the start of this run that out of all of Entei's limited moveset, Roar would be the key to unlocking the final battle against Red, I would have called you crazy. But when you're up against a lot of odds that are in your favour, you have to break out all of your tools and see what sticks. Compared to the Suicune run, I probably prefer Suicune as a Pokemon and don't find this gen's version of Entei to be all that compelling. But hey, maybe you could have made the run even easier. Feel free to let me know, and I've also included a list of all the trainers I fought and their locations in the description if you're interested. If you have an idea for an interesting run in the same style, let me know, and if you want to like and subscribe, go for it. Until next time, have a good one.